What after us? A simple question that all parents go through. Will our children be able to handle life once we pass away? There is no parent who does not think about this, regardless whether it is from a mainstream or a child with special needs. Will their caretakers, who we hand them over to, fulfill the trust that comes with the responsibility they now have in our absence? Will we be able to collect enough money to sustain them with the same lifestyle, comfort, security, and medical care they currently get while we are around? Lastly, and most importantly, have we at least tried enough to make our children emotionally strong and independent to survive and then thrive in a world without us? Questions that we carry all the time, day and night. This evening, we have with us Commander Bijur, Mrs. Sunita Lele, and Mrs. Shobha Mule to shed some light on some of these questions through their personal journey. Thank you so much for being with us today. A warm welcome to everyone this Sunday evening. We start this evening with Commander Srirang Bijur. He is president of Parivar, which is the National Confederation of Parents Organization. Parivar has 300 organizations affiliated with it who provide services to persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities. He is a parent and has wide-ranging experience in advocating for empowerment of persons with intellectual disabilities, as well as collaborating with central and state government for forming policies, schemes, and provisions to benefit persons with disabilities. Commander Bijur is also president of AWMH Maharashtra, which is one of the oldest organizations in Maharashtra providing early intervention services to children from Mumbai slums for the past 46 years. He is also closely associated with many other grassroots organizations. Commander Bijur is an engineer by qualification and served the Indian Navy for 21 years, that included tenures on 4 warships, and as Deputy Naval Advisor in High Commission of India, London. Later, he led the infrastructure development at TCS and at Bharati Airtel. Commander Bijur left remunerative employment to invest his time and resource for civil society organizations working in the intellectual disability sector. Commander Bijur has formed a public trust that supports capacity building for good NGOs working in intellectual disability sector. He lives in Pune with his wife and son. Both of them encourage him to do more and more for the sector. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Karen madam, and Sunita madam and Mule madam. I'm so glad that I have been invited by Buddy Center. Talking to parents is always a great pleasure, and discussing them, exchanging ideas have been able to build my knowledge to whatever extent I am today here. The topic is, of course, very dear to every parent's heart, and I am also one of them. After us, what? Now, having gone through the same stage for last, let's say, almost 37, 40 years, thinking what will happen to our son, who is today 37, after us, has also brought in a lot of questions as well as many answers. Most of it, the answers fit into every person's own conditions, whether it is the condition of the son, or whether it is your own finances or your household, many such things which are quite individualistic. But yes, when we talk about as parents, there are certain things which are very important, and I think we need to consider them as a general trend. Morning, I asked Karen Madam about what is the profile of the parents who are going to be present today, and she said that I think most of them are, let's say, 40 plus and so. And so I will restrict my talk only about such a profile of parents. One of the most important for parents who are younger, I'm saying younger than me because I'm 67, and especially those who are in the age where they are on a remunerative employment, it's very important for them to plan, and first of all plan the finances, because that is what at the end of the day would keep not only our ourselves when we are in old age, but also our son or daughter. Now when we talk about finding money, there are a lot of government schemes, pensions now, small little pensions which can also make a difference later on. So try and accumulate as much money as possible for your son. So that's a saving habit, because we do not know where the inflation will take us after 20 years or 15, 30 years or even 40 years. So that's one very important factor which, since you are all quite younger, must be taken into account. I have seen many families, even persons who are 40s, in 40s, who have taken VRS to look after their son and daughter. Now, I felt as a person that yes, it's not a good step, because finally the financial stability is one of the major governing factor once you grow up old age, as well as for your son or daughter who is going to be in a center. And also there are now a number of schemes which are coming up, like Pradhan Mantri Yojanas are coming, which of course they are meant for any person. And they, if we start investing today, after the son or daughter reaches age of 58 or 60 years, she starts getting pension. So apply in every such scheme where the person will start getting some pension, whatever we may save, but these pensions would be of some use, and they will keep increasing. Today, if government is talking about 3,000 rupees pension, I'm sure after 20 years this 3,000 will become maybe 20,000 rupees. So that's one part. The second part is also about training the son or daughter. That's very important. I am a trustee of a couple of centers, especially Nirdhar, which is there in Mumbai. Now, the difficulty which is faced by most of the trustees as well as the kind of persons who are managing is that they will not be able to accommodate our son or daughter who has got, number one, behavioral issues. Most of the centers are not today equipped, whether they accommodate them or not, but they are not equipped to take care of the behavior. And secondly, how this behavior manifests, that is also important. Children, or I would say adults today, who are possibly used to, let's say, hitting a person, parent, mother or father, very, it could be a very rare instance, but if that happens in a group home or in a residential home, that creates problems, not for the person with intellectual disability itself, but also with the caretaker and also with the management. We have had number of cases where such cases had to be sent back. I'm talking about again one of the center which is nearer Bombay, a boy who was staying there for almost 6 years, and when he was being tolerated, but at some point of time, both the managing committee as well as the caretakers, they said that no, we cannot hold him anymore. So when the child is with you, when the son and daughter is with you, it's most important, please take care, make sure that he settles down in a good and responsible behavior. Second and another important thing is about the ADLs, activities of daily living. Now that's another something. Whenever you take your son or daughter to any residential center, the first thing they will ask you is he independent with his ADLs, with his activities? If he is independent, then there is no problem at all. If he is not independent, then the questions will arise, both in terms of caretaking or caregiving, and also in terms of the money. So it's better. And I strongly feel that 90% of the person with intellectual disability can be trained. Why 90%? Even 95% can be trained if we are patient and if we apply the correct methods. Now, this is so these two are important. And third and equally important is also their emotions. Now, many of these children, they have been brought up with a certain degree of either you can say dependency, or I would say where the parents are too generous with them. Such children would also face problems in the residential homes when they go. And we have seen mostly those who are totally dependent on the parents, and parents have given too much of attention on them and they have become very less independent. They will have a problem in settling down, and similarly the management will have a problem in kind of keeping them up with them. So these are the factors which I'm talking to you, which should be taken care. Now, most of you will have your sons and daughters with you for next 10, 15 or 20 years minimum before you start seriously that, okay, should we send him now or should we send him later? So this is the time to work on them. Even if they are weak in any of these three factors, please have a dedicated attention on them. And lastly, I would also put it that there is something called medical conditions. Now, medical conditions are something which are, I would say, God given. We cannot really work much on them. But what kind of treatment is required and how often they require the treatment and where would they go for such treatment if they are in a group home or center, that must be looked after by the parent and given a very serious thought. Today, what is happening is most of the centers are little away from the cities. That's because that is an advantage which the organizers get because of low cost of capital cost as well as low cost operating cost. But these are the centers where when a person has got any serious medical issues, I'm not talking about kind of which are threatening the life threatening. I'm not talking about heart attack or such things. I'm talking about let's say some cerebral palsy getting more serious, requiring physiotherapy constantly. Such things, if they are there with a person, they become little difficult. So when you are making a choice where the son or daughter should be, this should also be considered equally, and see that the child or the son daughter would also grow with age. And when he grows with age, whatever are the medical issues he or she is facing, they will manifest in a stronger way, and he will or she will require medical help. Will that be available at that point of time or not? So these are the things which possibly we'll all consider. Now I'll come to the actual residential home. How do we choose a home, or rather, how do we go about having a home? There are many formats available. One first and the foremost is where all these persons they stay in a home residential center or a hostel like environment, and then they are taken care. If it is started by parents take care. If it is started by some professionals private, then they take care. Many of these formats I have seen. I would say the best one I have seen till to date is in Kurukshetra, which is run by a professional, and it's excellent. Yes. uh, and also some homes which I have seen which are run by the parents. That means the governing bodies are societies. They are also being, some of them are excellent. One of them is near Pune itself. But then there is a other side to it also. There are also many homes started by the parents which have not taken off very well. we always encourage that parents must start homes, because when a home is being started by parent, the other parents have got that feel good factor that yes, my son or daughter will be taken care. The flip side is that many of these organizations, they have their interest more tuned to their own son or daughter. Now this creates anxiety, jealousy, such things among the parent itself, and somewhere the interest of the organization goes down. So again, here the request is that we still feel as a parivar, we feel that the format is best run by the parents, but then let the parents not interfere in the day-to-day working of the home. That's most important. Let the managing committee have some parents, some professionals, and even some social workers, because that then it will bring out a view in the operation which will be more realistic and which will be more practical. Most of the parents, when they are there and their son or daughter is there, I'm talking about a home in Mumbai, the whole attitude and the whole focus almost gets on their own child. That may not be as good for the home many times. Now, when you have a home which is run only by the professional, then it is the other way around. Then it is mostly they are looking for profits or they are looking for money to that extent. So that's why I again said that we look for parents to establish home and run the home, but the managing committee should be a balanced one. The second part comes is about the structure. How do we structure the number one, creating a group home, and second, running a group home? Creating a group home is much simpler than running a group home. Creating a good group home only requires a very good planning, and there are many planners available who will make it into a good group home, construct building and facilities and the amenities which are required to be there. They can be done. Donation can be collected, but running a group home is much difficult. And again comes the first factor is about the money part. Now, as I said, when you are, if you all parents get together and say that we are going to construct a group home, please ensure that the entire capital cost comes from the donation. But the donation which comes from, and this donation, try and get it from CSR, try and get it from philanthropies, funding agencies, whatever the parents give, try and keep that money in a corpus. It's very essential for any group home to have a good and solid corpus because of two reasons. One is, when you start a group home, it has to start very professionally. The moment you want to start professionally a group home, you need to have a special educator, you need to have a gym instructor, or many such things will be required. And to pay for them during the initial 1, 2, or 3 years becomes a big hassle for any group home, because they wouldn't have been populated more than, let's say, 20% in first year and maybe 60 to 70% in the second year. So this is the time when if you don't pay professional, they will not come. And if you pay professional, then you don't have money for running the center. That is where your strong corpus whose interest will come for the help. The second part would also be that when these parents, when they give a corpus, they have more dedication and they'll be more attached to these centers. Otherwise, there is always a wandering habit, because like today also I can see at 2, 3, 4 group homes and say that, well, my son will be better here or there. So such kind of things will start occurring. The second structure is operating the group home. Now, one thing we must be very clear, and I find that most of you who are here are from a relatively good financial background, and we are all earning members there. In that case, never look for a group home which is running on charities or which is running on donations. It has to be totally self-governed and financially sustainable. Whatever the donations come, they must go into corpus. Whether the person who is giving it he gives it as a corpus or as a revenue donation, doesn't matter. You can save somewhere else the money. If I am giving you, let's say, 1 lakh rupees as a revenue donation, don't put it in the corpus. Then you can save 1 lakh somewhere else and put that into the corpus. But keep increasing your corpus and make your group home as sustainable as possible. You never know what will hit when these group homes will require more money. Giving you an example, now nobody knew about Corona or such a pandemic will ever happen. 6 months back or 8 months back, nobody would have dreamt about it. But it is there, and it is there as a reality. So most of the group homes today are thinking, especially those who are in one building, they are thinking that they must have a second building where either for isolation or for quarantine, the person with the intellectual disability can be shifted. So what is required is a corpus. Similarly, there will be many such occasions, many such incidences which can occur. So I again and again say that the corpus is very important. The last part I come is about the sustainability of a center. Ensure that whatever you do is sustainable, not only from the point of view of either money or from the building. It has to be sustainable from the point of view of processes. If you have a strong governing body and you also have professionals who are running the center, the governing body should govern it, but professionals must run it. And we have seen most of the group homes which are running very well today are the ones which are being run by a professional manager. Now, these managers would also cost money. They will be always more than 15,000 rupees per month, or I'm talking about uh, the caretakers, and the managers will be, let's say, 30,000 rupees per month. So that money has to be again catered for. But these are the centers which will run more sustainable than those who are run by only parents. Because parents also grow older, parents also have their own preferences, they will have their own social life. So how will they be able to adjust, especially when they grow, and how the center will go in which direction will be open to a question mark. So that is what I'll say. And later on, if we have any more queries, we can think about the question. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was very enlightening. We would like to have some more details, sir. You touched upon some very important things, and if you could provide some more information on, throw some more light on that later, which I could share with the other people on connecting to Buddy Center, would be very valuable to all of us. Thank you. Next, we have Mrs. Sunita Lele. She is a parent, special educator, counselor with a bachelor's degree in home science, child development from SNDT. She is founder of SAAD, Support All Abled Differently, Pune. She is also an author of a book, Autism, Ek Dikat Baat Te Wahivat. Resource Committee member, FFA. Over to you, ma'am.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Buddy Center, for calling me here today to share my experiences on my journey with my son. Commander Biju today has explained quite a lot in detail regarding the group homes, organizing it, running it. So I will touch very briefly on it, but I will focus more on my journey as a was I clear earlier? You're on mute.
Very clear.
Yeah, thank you. My journey started 31 years back when my son was diagnosed with a disability, which was later misdiagnosed and again diagnosed with a new disability. So the first 5 years went into, accepting and then letting go the disability part and just treating him as my son. My second son has special needs, And with him, my journey began as a mother for a special needs child, and also as a special educator. Till he was 10 years, I was struggling only as a mother, going from therapy to therapy, and then attending training sessions and empowering myself to become a parent. On my journey, I had the opportunity to listen to some thinkers, some good planners in finance, which gave me a very good idea when Mr. Damodar Tirak suggested to us in a parent meeting that try to lead a life as you will be able to give your son or daughter when they are adults. So don't be extravagant, just be normal, and just try to give what you can give your child the entire life. And that was a big takeaway for me. So that was one gem which I got along with my son's training and education. When he was 10 or 12 years old, I decided to get my degree in special education from Mumbai. After I came back a year later, then my dual journey started. It was like a railway track, but then railway tracks don't meet. My roles overlapped at times. Sometimes I would be a sensitive mother, sometimes I would think with my brain and be a special educator. So it's been like that throughout with me. What I realized then was every 10 years, every decade, the goals have to be reassessed and reset, because a 10-year-old and a 20-year-old's needs are totally different. We always treat our son or daughter as a small child, and we never imagine they have grown up. We still talk to them in baby language. We treat them as small children, and they never grow up emotionally then. So that was a takeaway which has always helped me. Also, what I realized as a special educator was that I can't prepare the road for my child. I'll have to prepare my child for the road. So I'll have to make him flexible. I'll have to teach him to learn skills to be in a group in society. So that was a thought process which took me a long way, because along with my son's friends, his friends' parents, my colleagues, my NGO, my family extended, and I have a huge family. I can boast to be a member of a large family like the Sahara family. So that is very important as a parent, which I would like to share here, that our journey is never alone. It always has to be with other parents. We always need company to give us some boosting, some moral support. Sometimes our family will not understand what we are going through. So at that time, maybe parents of similar children having similar problems, they may be able to understand us better, empathize with us better. So it's always important to have a support system for our own well-being also. As a mother, I always thought by the time my son is 21, I'll have a residential facility for him, because I always believed that it wasn't ever my normal son's responsibility to look after him 24/7. I always thought he could be a trustee, he could oversee my younger son's well-being. So, with that thought, I then decided to start talking to more parents. I realized India is a country with different religions, different beliefs, and many communities don't like to sort of expose or think of a community home, a residential facility. That made me flexible. It also gave me this belief that every individual will think differently for their own son and daughter. Here, what I would like to express is we can always have a plan, but there has to be a B, C, D plan also. So if you are thinking that the child will stay with the siblings, fine. But if that's not possible, do you have a plan B ready? If you are thinking of relatives, a joint family system, then do they know your child? Do they take your child for their family outings? If they are going on a vacation, is your child included in that? So that kind of knowing your child by the people who will look after your child after you will not be able to in entire capacity has to be assessed right in front of us. So I truly believe what after us should be checked in front of us. So why delay when they are 30, 40, 50, 60? Because if we delay it too long, our children also become rigid or fixated with their lifestyle or the family home or their surroundings, and they may find it difficult to then be flexible and adjust to a new surrounding. So that has to be thought of, I sincerely believe. Just to check whether children were ready or the parents were not ready. As a special educator, when I started my own NGO, I did this experimenting of being with my students for 3 months in couple of flats which were sort of given to me for use by a very well known person from Mumbai. So what I did was I had a center shifted to these two flats, and every day for the day, my teachers would come, and after the teachers left the center in the evening, as they would otherwise, couple of parents and I would be at the flat with all my students. They would go home on weekends and be at this center Monday to Friday. What I realized, we had a very detailed data of each child's needs. What type of milk they had, how much sugar was put, how much rotis they ate, what kind of vegetable they had. We had an entire data. And after the first week, I thought on Monday my kids would not come. But they came happily, and the parents were not so happy, because till then the parents had thought that they are indispensable and the children would not live without them. But here was an experience where children would say bye to the parents, and parents would go home with a little sadness that they are not really indispensable. So what we think as parents, that our children will not live without us, they will not be happy without us, should be really thought about. It may not be true in many cases. So as I said earlier, we have to prepare our children for living with others. That's one idea which I would share here. My second idea I'm sharing here is we should have plan A, plan B, plan C, so that uh, even if we have to change our tracks, if one possibility does not practically work, we can go to option number 2, and then we will not be stressed out that time. Number 3 is, how much are we really focusing on academics, and how much are we really stressing on life skills and independence, particularly leisure and recreation. Whether at a residential facility, group home, or at home, our children have to learn to um, spend time by themselves. They can't be entertained all the while. More so during COVID, many of you might be working from home. You must have realized by now that if your child has to be supervised every minute of the day, how difficult it is. It is same way very difficult for a group home to keep a child entertained the whole time if they do not have a leisure or a recreation on which they can sustain. It could be anything. It could be coloring, it could be scribbling, it could be just taking a walk, listening to music, just skimming through a book if they can't read. Anything. My son has a special ability of fixing puzzles, or he plays the keyboard well, or he can make the playing cards houses very well. He can do that for hours together, and that helps him a lot in the residential facility he is staying at the moment. So this is a message I would give the parents, that look after the skills for leisure and recreation. That's very important. Also, through my journey with my son, I realized he had limited skills in academics, but he was functional about it. Along with that, I also exposed him to a lot of experiences for medical checkups or that kind of needs. So if he has to go to a pathology lab to give blood, he does so very willingly. If he has to be taken for X-ray, if he has to be taken for sonography, then he cooperates very well. So this kind of cooperation, compliance, allowing an adult to be checked is very important. Now, why am I focusing on life skills so much? Is what I've realized is if a child is not independent for primary skills like eating, drinking, or toilet or brushing, there will be times where directly or indirectly they will be abused, because it might not be done very purposely, but it's a very monotonous job. And if our children are not cooperating for a simple activity like brushing, then incidences might happen which might give you a suggestion that the caretakers are not taking enough care. But as parents, I think it's our responsibility to see that health, hygiene, and leisure and recreation skills are developed as early as possible. That's very important. As a mom, as I said a little while ago, my journey always had these incidences where, as a mother, I would get upset with an incident, and then as a teacher, I would think of it differently. Like, for example, a mother once told me when I went to invite her for my older son's marriage. She's saying, I'm never going to be a mother in law. So that hurt me, that these things do matter to many of us, particularly if we have a single child with special needs. Now I'll share my experience. When my older son was getting married, I suddenly realized I will not have anything for my younger son. And he does enjoy getting presents, he does enjoy wearing good clothes, a suit, a tie. So, though he was 22, 23, I had a thread ceremony for him, which may not be so age appropriate, but it didn't matter. I don't follow these social rules of what will people say. So I had this thread ceremony where his friends were invited, my colleagues were invited, and he had a wonderful time. And that is how I tried to be normal with both my children. Years ago, when he was at an age when his peers were passing 10th and 12th, I remember then also I was a little depressed that this is the time when results are out and all my friends' kids are passing 10th and 12th standard. And look, my son is never ever going to appear for first standard also. And my friends were buying two-wheelers for their children. I said, my son will never ever get this opportunity. And then my husband stepped in. He said, nothing doing, you're not going to get upset with it. Let's buy him a cycle which has gears. So what, as a parent, I would like to share here is, we have our moments of getting upset, we have our moments of being depressed, we have our moments when we think that my child will not get this kind of experience, but we can have something parallel. And then who does that for us? The family. So both husband and wife working together, and the bond, if it's strengthened for a special child, it does go a long way. I have a wonderful family who supports me in all my activities. Along with that, I have a wonderful Saad family, which is an extended family. I know I can rely on them in kind of any kind of medical emergency. COVID taught us a lot. It taught us a lot that we have to make a will. It taught us that we have to find guardians for our children. It taught us that what if our children get sick? Have we taught them the required hygiene? Because, like I was mentioning, independent skills like brushing and toileting, the simple activity of wearing a mask or washing hands very carefully have to be taught 10 times more properly now. So, coincidentally, at my center for last 7-8 years for cooking and otherwise, even for one-on-one activity, we were teaching our children to wear masks. So we found that during these COVID times, my parents are saying our children are wearing masks for an hour or more than an hour. So if we use this COVID times to teach our children the rules required for their health, it will help them to integrate in society after this whole pandemic is over. They can then go to parks, they can go to malls with us, they can go to restaurants with us, and they can lead a normal life like any other person in the family. Let us all remember this is not the first pandemic or the last pandemic. So, how we gear up during these difficult times? If nothing else, the number of webinars which are being hosted for parents, and you can do it at your own convenience sitting at home. It's not personal. The entire family can attend the webinars and get trained. The entire family can then learn the techniques to be with our children. This is going to go a long way. So, thank you once again, madam, for inviting me here today. And parents, wishing you all the best and use all these learnings which you have got over the last few months and use them fruitfully for your children. All the best to each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It was very valuable to all of us. Extremely valuable. Uh, we have now with us Mrs. Shobha Mule. She is a hotel management graduate from Bombay and a postgraduate from Cornell University, USA. She has worked with Air India Hotels, HOD with Catering College for 30 years in Bhopal. For the sake of a special son, she shifted to Pune and worked as director. She started and designed a new course for aviation and hospitality management for Sihagar Management. Now retired and does consultancy for HM colleges. Over to you, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is my first experience, and for the almost for the first time in my life, I'm talking about my journey with my son. My journey has been totally different than these two persons who have spoken today. It's only related to me and my son and my career. My son is my second child, and first daughter is normal. The son is almost now 45-year old. Okay. I was in Bhopal. Bhopal was comparatively backward compared to Maharashtra. In those days, there was no institute, no doctor, no treatment there. For first year, I was sensing that there was something wrong with my child. After a couple of months, say after 4 5 months, I started realizing that there's something wrong with my child. We used to have a doctor coming practically every day to our house, but he couldn't diagnose anything. My son was suffering from diarrhea and he couldn't control that. After 1 year, there was some other doctor who had come in the neighborhood, and he told me that you just take him to Bombay. There is something wrong with your child. He never told me what it was. So I went to Bombay, and then I took him to Children Orthopedic Hospital. And there he was diagnosed as cerebral palsy, mentally retarded. And there the head, Dr. Mullah Feroz, he gave me in writing that this child will never be able to talk or walk in his life. So you forget about him and go for a third child. That is what the advice she gave me. Of course, I was quite heartbroken. I had to go back to Bhopal after that. Then with little whatever was available, uh, my journey started with my son for his betterment. So physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, everything, and going there was also very difficult. Though I had a joint family, my family never accepted the any problem with my son. Of course, as usual, a typical like how the in-laws would say, that your child is like this only because of you. My husband never accepted that there was anything wrong with him. He only thought that maybe because I pampered him so much, that is why he behaves like this. But that retardation never strike them at all. You know. So it is my lonely journey, you can say. I forgot about that. After that, I forgot that I was a mother. I was a mother of a daughter. I forgot about being a wife or a daughter-in-law. And 10 years, I was just with my son, giving him all sorts of treatment. And like how usually the people think, that when you, if something is wrong with your child, if you go abroad, then the miracle happened and the child gets all right. Because till he was 5, 6, 7 year old, I never realized that mental retardation is not going to get over. It's for the lifetime. I thought that after certain treatment, it is going to be all right. So I took him to London. I put him in a school. And then, of course, that was a school and subnormal school. So he was put in a subnormal school and he started blooming, he started developing. He was just 6 year old at that time. But after going there, he started walking. Can you believe he started walking after the age of 6? Till then, I was carrying him. But then, of course, we stayed there for 2 years, but ultimately the British government, they threw us out of the country because we were illegal immigrants and we came back to Bhopal. When I came back to Bhopal, I was quite heartbroken. I myself went into depression. And there was only one single missionary school where I put him. But then he wasn't learning much, he wasn't developing much. And the family pressures on me that it's only because of me the child is like this. No cooperation from anybody. So it was slowly started getting very difficult. Then one day I thought that there's no point in crying about it and doing. So I put him in one special school, whatever was available there. And I started with my career. I tried to put my heart in that. And then slowly, parallel, my career started growing also. And my son was doing a little better. When he was 18, 20-year-old, by then I could teach him to walk, run rather. He started using cycle very well. He became a little computer friendly. He learned English, Hindi, Marathi, writing and reading. But of course, beyond that, he couldn't go. So then, because of the friction in the families also, so because of pressure in my career also, I started looking for a residential school for him. And the mistake which I did in my life was I always kept my daughter away from him, thinking that I have a problem with one child, who's struggling to survive. So let my other child at least, have a normal life. So I didn't give her any responsibility. My husband never took any responsibility. So ultimately, the whole responsibility came only on me. Then when I started looking for the residential school, I tried to put him in Bangalore in one school, Bombay also, Pune Sadhana school also. But then somehow I was unhappy about it. He was also unhappy about it. To be honest, my child was not prepared to live away from me. And the most important thing is that I also wasn't prepared to keep him away. So I had to bring him back, after a few months. Then 10 years back, I thought that the best thing would be that I shift to Pune and look for some, because I had heard, I had visited Pune many times, I had seen many good institutes here. So I thought maybe he will have a little better life here, or I can find some solution to my son's problem. So I thought that I'll shift, and I convinced my husband that let me go to Pune, let me settle him, and I'll come back. Meanwhile, I'll look for a job also in Pune, so that will keep me busy and will earn little extra money also. My husband was too happy because he didn't have any responsibility for that. So I came here. I started the institute here. I started looking for a day school for him, but it was struggling only. And then suddenly later on, just after 1 year, my husband passed away with a massive heart attack. So Bhopal was closed for me. I had to be in Pune only. And then after 1 year, I found this place called Navashitij, run by Dr. Desai. She's got a special daughter and she started the institute for her own daughter. So I put him there. Yes, it was very difficult. Initially, it was very difficult because my husband had passed away. My son was put there and I was all alone in Pune. So it was a bit difficult. But slowly, Shantanu started settling there. And now for last 8 years, he's there. I still cannot live without him. So practically every month or every 2 months, I bring him home, keep him home, and try to give him a normal life. And then he goes back. Initially, he used to go back very unhappily. Now he doesn't mind. Now he is accepting this idea that he has to be there. He says, whenever he comes here, he says that, Mummy, you're getting old. I should be with you. I should be doing your seva. Why are you keeping me there? I'm not giving you any trouble. And he's totally independent. So, but you can't help it. So now he's there. Now he lives there in Navashitij. And I'm happy about it because that is the solution I have found ultimately, that after me, he will be there. My daughter is married, gone away to US. She's not going to come back. She's got her own children, her family. My husband is no more. So I have no choice. And the relatives, of course, they are never willing to, be guardian or look after them. So the best thing is that some institute I should find. And that is what I found. And now he's at Navashitij. So this is what has been my journey with my son. Initially, I used to complain. Now I have accepted it. And I'm happy about it. I'm happy the way my son is turned out to be. He's very fond of dancing, music, very fond of socializing. So he's happy there.
That was very touching, ma'am. Very touching. A big hug to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. A big hug to you. And thank you for sharing with us. That was incredible journey.
I think this is a common story with most of the mothers in India.
Thank you so
Whether
much.
we are educated or we are not educated. Shantanu, get water.
That was very heart-touching. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Yeah.
A big thank you to Commander Bijur, Mrs. Sunita Lele, and Mrs. Shobha Mule for being with us this evening and sharing a valuable information with us and sharing the journey with us. We do have trust in the infinite wisdom and the ways of this universe, and we should believe our children will be protected. However, we must also do what we can for them to the best of our ability. What, how, and where will be questions we will need to answer throughout our lives. For we are the chosen ones to take care of God's own children. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a very nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sunita, I'd like to have your telephone number. Can you share your number?
Offline, ma'am?
Yeah.
Yeah, offline.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you for inviting.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.